All right. Hello and good evening. Welcome to this course. Today I'll be talking about Python and SQL. Okay, MySQL. Okay. So as we all know, Python is one of the fastest growing programming languages. Yeah, it's used in data science. It's used in web development. And it's also used in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So, but today we want to talk about, of course, in this series, we're talking about data management with Python, which is very, very crucial and essential with Python. With Python can efficiently handle data. Okay. So, but then we have MySQL, which is a database management system or administrative system, and today we'll be using XAMPP. Okay, this application on Windows 10. But if you don't have XAMPP, of course you can use LAMP or any other one. To download XAMPP, I think you can get it at XAMPP download. Okay, just use XAMPP download. I think this says ApacheFriends.org. You can get it from ApacheFriends.org, and this is XAMPP. And download it from here. If you don't want to use XAMPP, you can also use the one called WAMP for Windows. Okay, so WAMP, I think one should be in samforge.com. You can download one from here. It should be around 200 megabytes or so. Yeah, you can actually download WAMP from there. So apart from that, you can use a SQL Workbench and anything that can, that can use to manipulate SQL database. So you can go to mysql.com and get a SQL Workbench, or any other way you can do that. I mean, it's okay. It's a MySQL official website. You can do that. So what is SQL? So SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Okay, which is used for relational database management systems. Okay, it's used for relational database management system, which we'll be looking at in a minute. Okay, that's what we use it to do, to manage the database. There is data from one form to the other. Alright, because I'm using XAMPP, XAMPP has this Apache server and the MySQL server. So I'm going to just start up my server and also make sure I start my MySQL, because without it we'll not be able to interact with the databases that we have. So after that, I think I can close it and I can just interact with it. So I'm going to VS Code in a minute, but to see our database and see what is going on there, we could actually come over here, and if I type just localhost without any port, of course, I should be able to see my dashboard. Yeah, so this is the XAMPP dashboard. So to be able to manage database with XAMPP, I should be able to head to my phpMyAdmin, or I can just come over here and type localhost/phpMyAdmin, and you should be fine. You should be able to see the database administrative system, of course the relational database management system, which is this phpMyAdmin, and many CMS or content management systems online, control panels use phpMyAdmin to manage their administration. So these are the database I have for now in this system. These are locally hosted databases that I have in this system. All right, so we're talking about how we can use Python to connect to this any of these database or to this application, and then be able to manipulate, insert data. There's what we call CRUD activity. So this CRUD, which stands for create, read, update, and delete record from a database. And of course, apart from read and delete, you can alter. You can apart from altering, you can do so many things like insert, delete, and all that. So I'm going to talk about those in a minute. All right. So, but the most important thing, you have your XAMPP, and you can see this particular page, PHP My Admin, where you see you might not have some of these databases, but there should be at least one or two database here. Excuse me. All right. So to move on, to be able to connect to MySQL database at any point in time, we need some credentials to connect to the database. So one of the credentials we need to connect to the database is the host name. Okay, that's the server name, which is, of course, if you look at here, this is the server name here. This is the host IP address. Okay, it's called because I'm on Windows, it's localhost. The next thing I need is the username. Okay, if I go to user account or go to privileges from here, if I click down here, okay, so from here, I think from user account I can do, oh yeah, privileges, I run all privileges. So this is the username of this database. So my username right now is root. Okay, that's what I'm using, and by default your own might still be root. They'll have the host name, which is localhost, or you can put this, password here is because of course I'm using password. Then global privilege, of course I can do all action. That means I have all privileges as an admin. I can do the CRUD activity, which is create, read, delete, and update any record of my choice. Now, how do I set up password? If you're using XAMPP, it's a little bit. If you're using MAP, it's a little bit easier. Because XAMPP is somehow, trickish a little bit. So I can click on edit privilege, and so you can bring me where I can change my password here, right here. I change my password. Click on change password, and I'll be able to change my password. But if I change this password and restart this particular server, I'll get an error because it doesn't recognize the password. For me to be able to do that, I need to recognize my password. I'll simply, of course, to summon XAMPP, since it's no longer in our task pane. Okay, I need to come over here. Oh, there are a lot of them. Just click on any one, open it. So I need to go to I need to click on configure. So from configure, I can click on PHP My Admin, and from here I should be able to edit my password. Let me see. So I have my username right here. This is the host, okay, the server, which is the host, and this is the host. So allow password, false, and so on. So if I go over here, look at my password. So this is my password here. 1 2 3 4 5 6. It's quite simple. Don't bother memorizing that. It's already in my local machine, so you might not be having access to that. You can use anything of your choice. So this is where we change the new password. Okay, the new password. All right, sorry about that. So I'll close that off. So I want to connect to MySQL database. So the first thing to do is to you can open your, I'm on Windows, so I'm using this, but you can actually use bash. Okay, but I prefer using this because most times it works. So you can do pipe is actually okay, let me show you the command, then we'll do that. So the command is actually to install the connector, the MySQL connector for Python. You need to say pipe install MySQL, okay, dot connector. Okay, so that is what you need to do to be able to use that. Okay, in fact, or you can actually just type this code. There's a code, I want to paste it here, right here. So you can just do this python-m, okay, then pipe install MySQL connector pipe. Okay, I didn't even copy this one, connector MySQL connector dash python. So this is dash python. Okay, so when you run this code, you can run the first one and the second one, either of them will run, but then make sure you actually navigate to the root directory. What do I mean? In this particular, I don't know if you're seeing this very well. Let me use bash, git bash. So I'm using it so that I can be able to, so that I will just be able to zoom in. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. So so that I can be able to zoom in here. Oh my god, can I just type this to you? Alright, okay, sorry about that. So you need to navigate into, like for my own system, I need to navigate into, now I'm inside the desktop, but I have another video covering how to use this bash to another terminal Windows both on Linux to do this. I also have a Linux tutorial on that. Okay, so but then you need to navigate into that. So you need to navigate into the directory to be able to do that. I'm going to use it anyway. Okay, so that's what you need to do before you can do the next step I'm doing right here. So after you must have installed the MySQL connector using pipe, we need to import it here. So I'm going to say import MySQL dot connector. Okay, that's what I need to do. Install that. Of course, if you run that cell, you see that it should not give you any error. Yeah, that checks good. Okay, I'm using Jupyter Notebook anyway, so that's why I have this Python SQL dot IPython notebook. Okay, IPYNB, which is Python notebook. You need to install Anaconda distribution, which will give you this IPython notebook. Then I have a video covering how to install this and set it up running on your VS Code. Okay, normally it might not run on your VS Code, but you need to set it up. Of course, you can use PyCharm, you can use anyone. You can even run this IPython notebook from your Chrome comfortably, and it will still run very well. Okay, but I prefer to use VS Code because of the added features and the plugins I'm using here to make this look good. All right, so this is the first thing we need to do, to import the MySQL connector. Okay, and then if you run this code and there was no error, then it means it's time to create our connection. So how do we create a connection? It's quite simple. I'm going to call it my own. I'm going to call it my DB. Okay, so it's equals to this my connection. Of course, you can import this thing as sorry, you can import it as let's say as SQL or whatever, then call SQL and use you can do that. Maybe as we progress I might just do it maybe once. All right, so can I say dot connect? Okay, so here in the connection I want to do something. I want to call the host. You need to use your own system host. My own is localhost. Okay, then you need to call user. Then the user, mine is root. Of course, yours has to be root, or you can use any other kind of a choice. And apart from that, we need to talk about the password. So the password here, of course, you can see my own was 1234536. So once we've done that, we could just print my DB to make sure we're not getting any errors. So Control key, enter to run it, or just click on this button here to run it. Of course, if you get this message, it means there was a successful connection to your database. It means the connection was successful. Okay, so that is how we can do that. So we're going to be looking at how to creating a database using Python. Then we're going to prove it to see if it's actually works. So if I go back to our code here, you see that we have different databases. Let's say we create a database called Python. If you check here, there's no database here called Python DB. So let's create a database and call it Python DB, just to prove that then this is working. So I'm going to create a new code block here. So or maybe we just do it from here, right? Yeah, just do it from here. Okay, so under here I'm going to call a function. It's actually a method anyway, so I'm going to call it my kuso. You can call it anything, of course, but just make sure you're setting it to that mydb, which is the connection variable. Make sure you're setting it to also method. Okay, this is a method you need to call to be able to use any, to be able to execute any MySQL connection. So this is the guy, the method that executes that connection. So I'm going to call that MyQSO and make sure that I'm calling the execute function on it. So if I say execute, and then I'll put the code I want to execute. For example, okay, before we create, let's see if we can see all the databases that exist in our data. So just show databases, and this SQL command, show databases, and then that is what we can do there. So if we click on show database, we can actually run that command to see if it actually ran. So to do that is simple. We need to look through this database and query. So I'm going to use a simple for loop. So I can say for x in MyQSO. Alright. So for s in MyQSO, just print s. So you can do that. Wow, and you see all our database is being fetched. So have the information schema, the Joyce blog, MySQL, Naprima store, performance schema, and so on till the valid audio DB. And of course, if we go over here, back here, you see that, look at our database, see information schema, Joyce blog, MySQL. You see all these databases are here. That means our connection was successful. We are able to pull all the database from here to this. So let's actually create our own database and see if it will actually go through. So to do that is simple. So instead of executing this command, we've done that already. I'll just comment it out. I'm using Ctrl// to comment it out. So I'm going to call another method, another execute. Okay, another execute. So instead of running just show database, I'm going to create my own database. So I'm going to say create. I'm writing it in capital letter because that's the best way to write SQL code. Okay, create database. Now, what's the name of, not databases, database? Sorry. So the database we want to create, let's call it Python DB. Python DB. Okay, that's the name of the database we want to create. So once we've done that, first let me put this down. Once we've done that, that is okay, that is fine. So we can actually run that command. Okay, can actually run that command. But before I do that, I want to create a new so under here, okay, look at what I will do. So let's say we are creating the database from there. So I'm going to pull this code just from here. Yeah, so I'm going to cut it out. So I've created the database. If I run this code now, it will run without any error. See, this check good, which means it's run well. So I'm going to paste the code I just copied, and then under here I'm going to execute another command. So I'll comment this one out because once I run it, the database has been created, so I don't need to run it again. So I just comment it out so that it doesn't run again. But however, here I'll continue. This is why I love Jupyter Notebook. I can have each of my code block running different code and at different time. Okay, anyone I don't want to run, I don't have to execute it. So even if I leave this code open and execute this one, so only this one is going to be executed. This one won't be executed. However, I'll comment it out anyways. Alright, so come over here and run this particular code. Control enter and check very well now. If you look very well, you see that we have a Python DB here. I don't know if it is cool to you, but this is crazy. Okay, so we've been able to create a database using our Python code. Very, very simple and as easy as that. So this is how we can create a database using Python. There are so many things again that you can do with Python database, this SQL database. In fact, what I want to do now is, before we move into the next lesson, what I want to do is simple. I want to create some more tables inside the database. So to select that database, to work with this database, this Python DB, and if you check, the name was changed here. It became small letter. But if you check where I executed the code, you see that the code was actually a capital letter code, and I had to do that. So you see, if you check out this, it's actually because the database, if you check all these databases, you see that none of them has a capital letter as a name, because normally database doesn't have like that. Not just database, some variables and some schemas. It's always very good to keep everything in the lowercase method. So under here, I'm going to select our database. So I'm going to call it a database. Of course, that's what it's called from the documentation. It has to be called database. Set it equal to the name of the database we just selected, we just created, which is our Python DB. We're going to save and run that cell. Once we run it, this becomes part of this object, the object of my DB, and any place we call it, we can be able to use it. So I have the object of my DB, I have my QSO. So anytime I want to execute anything, I just call the QSO. I'll execute any command, in any cell of my choice. Anytime I want to do it, I can do that. So this is how I can select a particular database from a table. So I'm going to create a very simple table that is very, very simple. The syntax is actually very simple too. So under here, I'm going to create a, where is it? Okay, I think it should be under after this. Yeah. So to create a table, of course, is simple. All I need to do is to call my QSO. Remember, I've already done the necessary things. I'll call my QSO dot execute, very important. And then if I call dot execute, I'm going to write the SQL code. So to create a table in SQL, SQL is just like almost like English language. I do tell people that it's very simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say create, okay, table. So if you want to create a table, we tell you to create what? Table. You see, as simple as that. Create a table, call it users. I'm going to call it users. Now the users, I just want to take three things from the user. I'm going to take let's say their username, so which is going to be a variable character, varchar, okay, and this variable character is going to be up to 255 characters, and I will explain this as we progress. Then I'm going to take their email. Okay, email is also going to be a variable character, varchar, and then finally I'm going to take the password. I like calling it PWD. You can call it anything of your choice, and it's also going to be a variable character. There are other data types, but as we progress, I'll mention them and things about. We're going to treat all of them as we progress. So now that I've done this, by just running this code, watch what will happen. I'll just run this command, and if it executes good, you see, it checks good, which is execute. Let's check our table. Okay, so go to our Python. Where is it? Okay, I need to refresh this page because I have not refreshed it for some time. So refresh this page. Good. Now we have our Python DB. So click here, and then on our Python DB. Wow. So we have a table users. Are you seeing this? We have a table users. So this table users we have created it using Python code. So click on the users table. Oh my God, something happened. Okay, of course the table is empty. Yeah, the table is empty. There was an error here. I don't know what the error is. See then deny user PME. Okay, I don't know why the error is there, but I'm sure I need to find out. Okay, yeah, we'll have our table anyway, so we can populate the table using, we can also create another table if we want. We can populate this table with record. Okay, so let's look at then we can even check if the table exists using code. Of course, to check if the table exists using code is quite very simple. All we need to do is to just show tables. Okay, so we're going to execute another command, show tables. So I'll just put it here anyway. Okay, just put it in the next line. So I'll just say MySQL. Okay, again, this is why I love this Jupyter Notebook. I can write different commands at different lines. So just say show tables. Make sure that it's S. Then to look through it, I just say for X in MySQL. Okay, then I just print it. Print X. Okay, run that, and then I should be able to see my tables here. So it's only one table that is here, which is the table of user. Of course, that's the only table we have. I want to get another table, I still come over here and edit this table. call another name on this table. Put any, as much of as things we want to do here, we can put them there and run that particular command, and it's going to execute and show us all the table we need. Okay, most tables need ID. In fact, almost every table need ID, and they need those ID is always good to add primary key to them, which we didn't do. Okay, what we can do is that we can insert the table we just inserted. We need to add the ID and also add a primary key to it. I think that was why the error was there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to alter that table and add primary key. Okay, alter the table and add primary key. Okay, so let's do that. So inside so I'll just create another code block here. Just pardon me for this. I'm creating a lot of code block, but just so that you will understand, and I'm leaving the code so I'll be able to understand it. So we created the table user, and then the user doesn't have ID column, and that ID column in fact the table doesn't even have primary key and all that. So we're going to add another SQL command to alter that table and add before username. So we want to add primary key and all that. So let's do that. So we're going to say alter table users. Now we're going to add a column. So add column, this column, yeah, column. Let's call it ID, or let's just call it user ID, user underscore ID. Okay, and then it's going to be an integer, so I'll call it int, and then I want it to be auto increase. Let it automatically increase, so auto increase. Okay, increment, and then let's give it primary key. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to execute that particular row, then we'll check and see if it's done. So execute that row, good, and we have a check good here. So let's go back to our table and check if it has been implemented. So I'm going to refresh this particular page, do that quickly, and insert command deny to user. Okay, I don't know why that is there, so click there. Okay, still on that error, access denied, something. I think it failed somehow. Okay, there's an issue. There's an issue with that. So I'll check it out in a minute, debug, and get back to you. But before I do that, I want to run through a list of the commands we have for SQL. Okay, in fact, as far as Python is concerned, this is like almost all we're going to be doing. The only thing I know I need to talk now is on the insert menu. Okay, execute menu this thing. Let me just touch that. Execute menu in Python SQL. Okay, so when we talk about the execute menu function, okay, we have, let me show you quickly. Let's do from here. So we can say MySQL dot execute. Yeah, look at what I'm talking about. Execute menu. Okay, of course it's a function. Okay, so execute menu, this method prepares a database operation, query or command, and execute it against all parameter sequence or mappings found in the sequence of those parameters. For example, Python in Python, a tuple contains a single variable but must include what, comma, that kind of a thing. So anytime we're having a function or a method, of course you know that you can separate different method or functions using a comma separated values, okay, in your this thing. So many of course there are so many documentation that are proving this particular syntax, you know, and how to use them. All right, so I'll be covering that in the next few videos, or maybe in the next video I'll be covering that part of this thing. So let's look at SQL actually proper. So inside here you see that we have for example, let's say I create a table from here. So the same command we are having, let's say I want to create a table of students, okay, and then let's say I just want that 4 stuff there, 4 columns. So the first thing I want from a student is the, let's say, the student ID. So I want the student ID is going to be an integer, which means it's going to be a number, and I don't want it to be more than 11 digits. And then I want this thing to be a primary key. So I'm going to go over here and say I want it to be auto increment. Of course, if I do that, automatically it becomes the primary key. Of course, apart from the primary key, we have the unique key, index, full text, and so on. But we want it to be a primary key. All right. The next thing I want from a student might be maybe a full name of the student. I like writing this together, so I'm going to do underscore name. So it's going to be a variable character. These are the data types you have in SQL. Okay, we have the integer, which is kind of a number, or what say a number, variable character, which is characters, normal alphanumeric characters between 0 or 1 to infinity. We have the text, which is much more bigger than that. Text allows us to write even a blog post, you know, something that is much more bigger. Of course, it's like up to 2 raised to the power 16 length of a character. More than that, we have the date object, of course, for writing date. Then we have the repetition of the int and big int as well, which is just about the int, just the different sizes. We have the float, the double, the real numbers, and so on. And we have the boolean, which is true or false. And then we have the variable character and all those. So all this is, they are relatively, all these boolean blog and all that, they're just almost relatively the same thing. We have JSON, which is the last one here, which is talking about JavaScript object notation for storing key value pairs of data. Okay, but we have the spatial data, which is talking about something like coordinates. You know, when you talk about longitude, points, and so on, can use that. But right now, all I want to use is the variable character in the full name, and we want to make sure it's 255. Now, 255 is actually the 256th value, which is 2 raised to the power 8. Talking about 8-bit. You know, a lot of stuff there, but let me leave that for now. So let's say the next one I want to talk about here is the registration number of the student. We can leave it to be int, and then use what's it called, unique ID, UUID, to verify that. Then finally, let's say we want the students let's say we want student score, for example. Score can also be a number. And then let's say, for example, maybe we are done. Now I'm going to, of course, if I say we will still do that, but I want to preview the SQL. Now this is the SQL. If you copy this code right, the way it is, and paste it in Python and run it under the hood, it's going to still create this table. Do you doubt it? Then let's try it. Okay, but I'm going to change the name because already this one is already created, okay, by just running this code. So, and the code is quite simple, saying create table, you know, call the name of our database, then the name of the table we want to create. So the table ID, student ID, then int 11. Not none means we don't want it to be empty, it has to be filled. Then we'll have an auto increment, you know, then we'll have other ones. Let me refresh this page and see. So when I refresh it, it wasn't actually created. So let me do that. So can use Python and actually do that. How do we do it? Actually remove all these syntax here and replace it with the one we copied. Okay, and now it's much longer. Okay, so if I execute this command, it's going to actually create a table users for us. Let's do that. So control execute, and then it goes and then it checks good. So if we come over to our code now, our database, sorry, and then refresh this page, you should be able to see the student. Yeah, look at it, student table. So click on the student table, and then we're having that kind of error. And I'm going to fix this in a minute anyway. So just don't worry so much about it. Alright. So that is what we are saying. That is what we are saying. Alright. So we can do so many other commands here, like you know, inserting record, updating record. So how the structure, which is the structure of the database. Okay, like this one is the username, the email, and the password. The one just created last. It gives us the structure of the database. And I'm discovering that it seems the ID, the user ID. Why is it at below? I don't know. Okay, it's supposed to be on top, like the very first one, but it's cool. Yeah, there's no problem about that. So I have the SQL here. You can write the SQL code. You see, like select all from users. So you can actually write those code here, and it also, if you run those code from here, it will also work. But the reason why we're using the Python is because we want to be dynamic, and then want to be able to fetch record or data from Python, then use it and solve some mathematics, as we progress. All right. So that's why we might want to do that. Okay. Then apart from that, we have the search. If you want to search, if you want to insert new record from the database, of course, you can actually enter the records here, on this column that are empty. Then enter everything you want and click save or run. It will run that. The next I want to talk about is the export. Now you can export this database to another. You can export the record and maybe even the data in the database, and then import it in another database and make use of it from that particular database. You see, the import, you can import another one. Now, privileges gives us the ability to create accounts, read accounts, no account password, change account password, no users and all that. So we have operations, which is like settings, and then we have the tracking. If you want to do tracking of the uploads that you're doing in the site. All right. So those are some of the things you can do in here. Okay, so you can fetch our database, see all our database, you can create a new database, you can even run some new record, you can even insert record into our database using this. Of course, by next video, next class, I'll talk about how to insert a new record into the database, which is quite simple anyway. It's still the same execute, and it's not even very long. So, but before I go, I want to talk about execute meaning. Like you want to execute two things at the same time. How would you go about it? Alright, so you know that the thing is, executing a Python command. When you want to execute one single command, you use this. So I'm executing this line of code, just like. But if I want to execute more than one SQL command in a database, I use the execute many function. Okay. So, and there are some other method I can use to verify some of those things. Okay. For example, when you execute a record, you can actually call the commit method and then use it to check if the record have actually been inserted. Okay, let me do that in a minute. So I'm going to create something here. So let's say this is our users table. We want to insert things inside it. All right. So what I'll do is simple. Okay, now let me just call SQL as a method. I'm going to say insert into users. I can use that of students. Let's use students. Students. I think that's what we call it, right? Let me check. It should be here, right? Let's see. Yeah, it's here. So these students is what we are talking about. I want to insert into that students. What do you want to insert there? Remember, it has the students have a student ID. Student ID. I want to insert the full name. From the full name. The next thing I want to insert is let's see. Page number and score. So I want to start I want to insert the score. Alright, so that's what I want to do for this table. But that's of course not all. We need to set the values. Now, in the setting of the values, I'm going to use what we call prepare statements. So I'm going to do values. And prepare statement is not peculiar to Python, it's something that is still peculiar to SQL. Okay, so in Python, the syntax is a little bit different. So here I'm going to put the percentage sign. And I'm going to put x, which is the prepare statement. Now, I can actually type the code here, the SQL code, what I want to insert. Let's call it values. Okay, or value for now. Okay, value. Let's say the value we want to insert into this database is simple. Remember, we're using tuple. This is a tuple data type, which is where you write something and you separate it with a comma. All right. So let's say the user ID we want to insert is now the ID is auto increment, so it should automatically insert that. So I'm not inserting that. Okay, this is supposed to be 3. This is supposed to be 4. Okay, let's do that. All right, student ID. What I just put 1. The next thing I want here is student username. So put my name. And then the next one I want to talk about is the next thing we're inserting is apart from full name is range number. Let's say the range number is ABU or ABS until that. Okay, and then the last one is the score. Okay, let's say the score is 67. Okay, now how do we execute this command? It's quite simple. So we can just call SQL MySQL that executes, and then what we want to execute is simple. I want to execute this SQL and the value. So we're executing these against this and all that. Alright. So then, but this time around, because we're executing it this way, we will not use what we call the commits. So I'm going to say my DB, which is the database object we created. It's never an object. I don't know what to call it. Let's say commit. Alright. So we have committed that change. So here, to prove that this actually works, all I need to do is to make sure I'm creating the number of rows. So I can say print MySQL dot row count. Alright, so this shows the number of rows that have been affected by this particular SQL code. So I'll now say, let's say record inserted. Okay, so let's run that command. Hopefully that goes. So it says one record has been inserted, which means this code, this user now has been inserted into the database. Let's prove that. If we go back to our code here, and then inside the, I think it should be students, click on students. This error again. Okay, good. There's a problem with the users table. What is this here? Click display the minimal. I don't know why there is error with this users table, but I'm actually after the student table. It doesn't even allow me to do that. So this is what there is an issue. You know what? Let me just delete this table for now. I'll just draw a table. So let me click on structure. Should be able to drop that table. This for users. Okay, there's a little bit of an error here. No, let me just delete. Let me drop the users table. So to delete it, we'll call it drop. Even if it has refused to error in processing, I don't know why there's a big error here anyway. Okay, but it's okay. So to execute mini anyway, I will look into this in a minute. So executing many command like this, having this command execute as an array or that kind of a thing. You can call it list or array. All we need to do is to run this command again, but then I'm going to cut this. Make sure I open a list. Make sure I open a list, and then paste this whole thing as with different name. This one can be investigate. It can be summary. Right. So the array number could be different in anything. And I can score different things. Right. So the difference here is just that I'm saving many, into the database. I'm executing many commands into the database at the same time, but every other thing stays the same. So what I will do is, because it's many, I'll just simply add many here, and that is all. If I run this, okay, we have an error. So we have a minute to look into this. So I just use 1 minute and look into that. Meanwhile, thank you so much for hanging around. So I'll get back to you in a minute.